Hello folks, this is David Hurley of EasyChessTips.com, your pub chess bluffer, reporting to you on the second day of the Hiroshima Open Chess Tournament, brought to us by the Abeno Chess Society from Osaka. This day two, we played 3 games. It was the big one. And I'm reporting on the third game, which is written down here. The third game I played, I was black. Playing against a d4 opening, and here we have the scene. Look at how concentrated I am. This is actually towards the end of the game, by which time the wheels have completely fallen off my game plan. Now, when playing black, I am trying out a new, as I have said before, explosive chess opening repertoire for black. A complete system based on one d6 in response to anything that white throws at you, as taught by Jouni, Yrjola and Jussi Tella, 2 Finnish chess experts. However, I only picked up this book a few days ago and gave it a very what can we say, a very brief perusal. So I don't really have this opening down pat, but I thought I would use this chess tournament as an opportunity to try this opening out. There are 7 games, so I was going to be black either 3 or 4 times, most likely. And in this game, the first game of the morning, yesterday morning, Sunday, the 22nd of September 2019, I was indeed black, and my opponent opened with d4, my old familiar friend d4. And so here we go. We have the d6 universal response springs into action. And yes, we have d4, c4. So I feel I'm in home territory, and I whip out e5 straight away. Now, this is not mentioned at all in the book by Jouni, Yrjola and Jussi Tella. But according to Chess, this is the rat defense, the English rat defense, which seems kind of suitable, really, since I am the honorary Englishman in this competition. So the response was rather careful. In the post-game analysis, when I went away and looked through this game and compared it with the book recommendations, the Finnish chess experts rather dismissively call this third move an entirely passive response. And indeed, what I have found with this chess opening, although the title calls it an explosive chess opening, it seems to me to be really quite a passive and quiet opening, which is sort of what you want if you don't quite know what you're doing. I responded with f5. And then we have knight c3. So this is the classic d4 opening that I'm familiar with when playing white. It looks right. This is the opening pattern against the Nimzo-Indian, for example. White's opening pattern against the Nimzo-Indian, when black would open with knight to f6, e6, and bishop to b4. But we're not in that territory at all here. The pawn structure is pointing in the opposite direction, black's pawn structure. And we make a nice pretty pattern with the pawns going that way and the pawns going that way and the 2 knights. It's all very pretty and symmetrical at the moment. And we're still in the opening territory. I've checked off on the sheet of shame. The blue ticks show that I'm following the recommended moves as recommended by my 2 Finnish chess experts. And so we continue with bishop to d3, and then I whipped out my c pawn to c6, all part of this opening system. We then have knight to e2, and yes, this looks like a nice little move here, the nice little advance of the e pawn to take advantage of that passive e3 move. I think that would have been a rather nice thing to do. I looked at it, but I was perhaps in awe of the opening system too much, and instead I did the E7 bishop move. At this stage, it's going to come at some stage, and I did it now, but I think with a bit more if I had spent a bit more time analyzing the board. This is one of the things which has emerged from this competition, is that I need to work more with the time available to me on the clock, and start going through the 10 points that, where is it? I'm searching for a book. The 10 points that my man, here he is, Jeremy Silman, says we ought to cover when analysing any situation on the board. The 10 what are they? The 10 chess imbalances of your material, the dynamics, the development, the structure, the initiative, the files and the spaces, the minor pieces, the what else is there? The statics and the squares, or something like that. I've got it. He actually has a proper list of I'm just reading off the cover of this fine book. This book teaches you how to think about chess beyond these opening repertoires and all that. Let's have a quick look in here. Yes, the 10 imbalances, the minor pieces, the pawn structure, the space, the material, the control of a key file, control of squares. Do you have a lead in development? What about king safety? Do you have the initiative, which he calls are you leading with the agenda? And yes, and also the statics and the dynamics, which is the most difficult concept of the whole book. Anyway, so if I had followed the Jeremy Silman system, I would perhaps have found that advance of the E pawn, but I didn't. I just plodded along, and my opponent castled, and I responded with the old knight out to A6, one of the signature moves of the opening, and then back down to C7. So we are 8 moves in. Nothing has been taken yet. This so-called explosive opening is really quite quiet and passive, and you plod along, setting out your pieces like so. However, the nice thing about this system is that, as you can see, light chess is saying that, suggesting that we are more or less equal. Black may even have a very small advantage going in. We whipped out the old bishop to E6. I'm feeling quite happy about this setup at this stage in the game. Oh dear, it looks like light chess is changing its mind with deeper analysis until this move here, the queen to E2. I then responded with the advance of the pawn. Now, why did I advance my H pawn suddenly when it looks as if I'm getting ready to castle on this side? It's because I noticed that this knight here is rather stuck, has nowhere to go. However, my opponent noticed also and shifted his castle over. I followed the light chess recommendation, without knowing it was a recommendation, of course, by continuing the advance of my H pawn, forcing the bishop to... Why do I always call knights bishops? This is crazy. A knight is a knight and a bishop is a bishop. They are completely different pieces. Forcing the knight to retreat back to F1. And then, now this is where things go pear-shaped for me. So we have this nice recommendation again by light chess to snaffle the D pawn to open up this file, which looks a bit risky when you've got the queen pointing at the king. But what will happen is, let's just take that pawn. It's one of the sidelines that I didn't do. If we take the pawn, we have a little advantage, and the pawn is taken back, and then we have a recommendation of either a castle or putting the king into this rather nice square here, F7. And castling will land the rook in the middle, where we can slip it over to e8, and then we have a nice open file once we get round to shifting the bishops. Or we can keep it on e8, or keep it on f8 for the advance of the f pawn. Those are some ideas that I did not think about, and instead I made the beginning. This is the beginning of the fateful errors of my game. I advance the pawn, and you can see immediately Lichess gives white the advantage here. This is a mistake, and we will see why in a moment. My opponent took the pawn. I took back. He takes with the knight. I whip my... So this is what I was aiming at all the time, was my bishop. I'd seen that there was this rather nice arrangement of queen and rook here, and so that was what I was gunning for by clearing a path for my bishop. However, there was a complete miscalculation, if you can call it calculation at all, on my part. I bung the bishop up there, forgetting, not noticing, or noticing and not doing anything about the fact that he has the perfect response, which is to take my knight, which removes the defense of my bishop. He takes knight with check. This is the disastrous thing. See now why it would have been a good idea to put the king up here. He takes the knight with check. I take back with the bishop, and now all the lines are open for a massive white attack. Down goes the pawn with check, and then down goes that bishop, and so much for my total miscalculation of an attack on the queen and rook. This is a massive blunder. Now the blunder happens, where are we, on move 17 or so. Where did I advance? Where did I advance my pawn? Move 14 is where that whole string of sad events takes place. But the game carried on for 58 moves until my doom was sealed. So the moral of the story is to do a bit more calculation, or at least look at the board from the point of view of our man, Jeremy Silman. Think about what all the imbalances are and use the time on your clock. I had plenty of time on my clock to do some in-depth thinking, but I failed to do that. I lurched with the first thing I saw. I didn't double check at all. So the initial opening moves, no problem at all, really. The opening, my moves were more or less the book moves. Even though I've only given the book a casual perusal, the basic opening structure is actually quite easy to remember, especially when confronted with this d4 opening and a passive version of the d4 opening. But the real moral of the story is that I need to do more of the real analysis that my man Jeremy Silman talks about in his wonderful book, How to Reassess Your Chess, which I'd recommend to anybody who's looking to improve their chess game. Okay, folks, that's all from me, David Hurley of EasyChessTips.com, your pub chess bluffer, reporting on the disastrous outcome of my third game of 7 in the Hiroshima Open Chess Tournament that has actually just finished today. That's all from me. I'll be reporting on Game 4 shortly. David Hurley, EasyChessTips.com, over and